So with that being said, Brandon, I'm going to come at you first. With the Tennessee Titans, they are currently sitting 10-5. Um, what do you think? The Titans going to make the playoffs this year?
I think they're pretty much a shoe-in for the division title, because basically they can clinch the title with this week with a win over the Dolphins or a loss to the Raiders, or the Colts lose to the Raiders. I would say it's more likely they beat the Dolphins and the Colts lose to the Raiders. That being said, they need to win once in their next 2 weeks to clinch the division title, and their last two games are against the Dolphins and the Texans. I imagine they can win one of those games. Even if they don't win this weekend, they'll probably win next weekend. I don't think this weekend was an indicator of the Texans to come. I think it was an anomaly. We've seen it before. So I think they're pretty much a shoe-in for the division title and locked in playoff spot. Looking at the division leaders, because of the tiebreakers they hold, they'll probably keep the second seed.
Mm. And Jen, how about yourself? Do you feel the same way about the Tennessee Titans, or do you see them some kind of epic collapse and falling all the way down to like seventh place or something crazy like that?
No. I think they're definitely going to clinch a playoff spot, but you know, just knowing the Texans or sorry, the Titans, something bound's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. They only have one reliable wide receiver, AJ Brown, and he just came back from injuries. Their run games kind of sucks. Ryan Tannehill throws footballs like sacks of potatoes, except to AJ Brown. So, and Julio Jones might be the worst trade of the season for the Titans for what they gave up and his production. So overall, I think the Titans, they're gonna get into the playoffs, but they're gonna definitely have a lot of issues coming up when they're in the playoffs.
Aren't we expecting King Henry to be back soon?
Yes and no. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, if Derrick Henry comes back, but the thing is that you also gotta think about it from Derrick Henry's perspective. He got his nice extension last year, which is nice, but it was a 2-year deal. After 2 years, they can cut him loose because they don't want to be, they don't want to be the Rams and give Todd Gurley a whole bunch of money and he flames out after a season or two. So there's always that, there's not a huge premiums on running backs anymore, and even though he is the king, um, there's something that that he's going to have to take into consideration is, do I want to come back and help the Titans win maybe 1 or 2 games in the regular season or in the playoffs, or do I take my time, make sure everything is 100% or 110% so that I can continue on with my contract? Because if anything happens next season, he loses his speed, his agility, or his truckiness to through people. He's going to be essentially he's going to turn into a journeyman running back at that point. So I think Derrick Henry's he's probably going to come back maybe for one playoff game, but just looking at it from a perspective that players are businesses, um, definitely something that you know that he's going to have to consider before coming back.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Fair enough. Things to think about, but this team, as Brandon said, is on the cusp of clinching that second seed. Um, but let's move to down to the team in the third spot, the Cincinnati Bengals, who are currently sitting at 9-6. Their next two games are against the Chiefs and Browns. Brandon, do you think the Cincinnati Bengals will clinch a playoff spot this weekend or next weekend, or not at all?
I don't know about this weekend. They could clinch it, but they have to beat the Chiefs. And that will all depend on the Chiefs because they've clinched a playoff spot, but they might be fighting for the bye. I don't think they'll clinch this weekend because the Chiefs are fighting. I'm just looking at it now. The Chiefs are fighting the Titans essentially for the bye at the moment because if they lose a game, they don't have the tiebreaker, I believe, because the Titans beat them. So they're going to have to win, which means I think they'll beat the Bengals. The Bengals are a good team, but I don't think they're hot Chiefs in December caliber team yet, anyway. So I don't think they'll clinch it this week. And as I look deeper into this AFC North playoff picture, I want to say they'll make the playoffs, but they'll have to beat the Browns. I think that'll solve it for them. So yeah, I think they'll make the playoffs. I don't think they'll clinch anything this week. It might come down to the wire.
Jen, do you feel the same way about the Bengals, or do you think the Bengals will be able to squeak this one out?
I think KC is most likely going to rest some starters, or at least 40-50% of some of their players, just because they know that they have 2 games essentially locked down um, for the first round bye, and Andy Reid has a history of sitting out players, when it comes to end of the season, just to get the first round bye and everything like that, just kind of get everything rejuvenated. You can tell from the past 2 games where Patrick Mahomes has not thrown touchdowns to Tyreek. Obviously, Kelsey was on the COVID list, and yet he was able to find his other targets um, throughout the game. So I think overall, it's definitely, Kansas City is kind of in a good spot at the moment, and then for the Bengals, Joe Burrow just threw 500 yards in the last game, but with a third string, well, actually, yeah, be a third string quarterback, and the Ravens and everything like that. But the Ravens did have a really good defense, so I think this is going to be a tough game. That the Bengals is going to be on a must-win mode, where Kansas City is more going to be like a slide. It's kind of like you expect the Kansas City Chiefs to win, but they won't cover their spread kind of situation.
Okay. I guess that's a little betting advice there. I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs will cover the spread. But both of you think the Bengals will end up making the playoffs, which is a great thing for them. But let's move on to the team in the 4th spot. Jen, I'm coming to you here. The Buffalo Bills sitting at 9-6. Their next 2 matchups are against the Falcons and the Jets. Do you think the Bills can take this one home and or take these 2 games home and clinch a playoff spot?
I definitely think so. I mean, I hate to say this to you, Brandon, but they won't. The Patriots won't be division titles, for this season, just because Sean McDermott, what we're going to talk about later in the show, that he is in a win mode now, for everything, and I think so is Josh Allen, so is Stephon Diggs. I mean, Stephon Diggs was out on Sunday telling people to shut the fuck up, to Patriot fans. So, I think there's definitely that momentum going for them. And I think they're going to win out and secure maybe the number 2 seed, in the AFC.
Brandon, how do you feel about this? Do you think the Bills are making the playoffs as well?
They'll definitely make the playoffs, just because they're going to win the division. I said it last week on the podcast. The Bills Patriots game, was essentially the AFC East title game, because if you look at the schedules of the 2 teams, it's highly likely that they both win out, which wouldn't change the seeding. So it means that the Bills would stay in that spot. That being said, they could move up in the standings, up to that 3rd spot. The division can't be clinched this weekend, but it just comes down to them winning out the games. And they'll clinch the playoffs this weekend. The reality is they have to beat the Falcons and the Rams have to beat the Ravens, which I think are both very viable scenarios. So I think they'll clinch a playoff spot this weekend, and then it'll just come down to the last game of the season where they'll win the division. But I'm not overly upset about it unless we have to play them in the first round of the playoffs.
Would you not want to play them in the first round of the playoffs? Is that what it is? No?
No, I don't want to do that.
All right, let's move on to the 5th spot. Jen, I'm coming back to you here again. This time with the Indianapolis Colts and Carson Wentz. They are currently sitting at 9-6 as well. And their final 2 games are against the Raiders and the Jaguars. What do you think happens to the Colts and Mr. Wentz?
I mean, realistically, I think they're going to clinch the playoffs. I mean, it's against the Jags. Let's be honest. Raiders, Raiders might have a shot of beating them this week. But the Jags got beat by the Jets last week. So they're literally the worst team in the NFL. And, at this point, like, they might as well just forfeit this game at this point. Even without Carson Wentz, because Carson Wentz is unvaccinated, so he has to stay, I believe, an extra week longer than vaccinated players. But even without Carson Wentz on the field, I think just with the run game of Jonathan Taylor, they're going to clinch the playoff spot. I think for their mentality right now is go after Tennessee and the divisional title. So I think they're going to win out and be in the playoffs. They might be the highest seed in the wild cards, which look out for whoever's going to play them in the playoffs.
Brandon, any chance the Raiders or the Jaguars upset the Colts and bump them out the playoffs or the playoff race?
If they continue the COVID outbreak in the Colts locker room, it will eventually batter them down. Yes. They've already lost Darius Leonard and a bunch of their O linemen. So if it gets worse, then potentially. But I think they should beat the Raiders. I feel like I said this up until now, but they were a way better team than their record suggests. They have a really well built team. As long as everybody's healthy, obviously, led by Jonathan Taylor, that I think the Raiders shouldn't be too big of an issue. And I definitely think they'll beat the Jags. But they can't go for the division title. Basically, Titans have to lose out, and the Titans play Miami and Houston, which means they have to lose both those games in order for the Colts to have a shot to win. And then Indianapolis has to beat both the Raiders and the Jags. So they have to finish with more wins than Tennessee because Tennessee has the tiebreaker. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that the Titans are going to lose back-to-back weeks to Miami and Houston. I think that's really unlikely. So I'm going to say they're going to make the playoffs, but they are not taking the division title.
All right. So the sixth place team here, so far, pretty much from 1 to 5, you guys have agreed we'll be clinching either this week or next. Brandon, this team near and dear to your heart, obviously the Patriots, who are also 9-6. Next 2 games against the Jags and the Dolphins. I know you already mentioned earlier that you feel that the Patriots are going to be clinching that playoff spot. When will that happen? This week or next week?
See, we need 2 things to happen. We have to beat the Jags, and the Dolphins have to lose to the Titans this week. And that's a tight game. Miami's been pretty hot. I want to say that it'll happen this weekend and that I won't have to worry about it next week. And we'll just be fighting for seeding. But that being said, all they have to do is beat either they have to get to 10 wins, essentially. I think they'll be safe because what I'm looking at is the difficulty of schedule of the teams that have 8 wins. And I don't know if any of them can get to 10. So as long as we beat the Jags this weekend, I think we'll be safe. It would be better if the Dolphins lose because then we'd actually be clinched and I won't have to worry about other teams.
So, I mean, the Dolphins and Patriots game, that's the last game of the season for you guys, yeah?
Yes.
So if things go poorly for you, next week could be like make it or break it, like pretty much playoff football.
Next week, yeah. If things go as terribly as possible, next week could very well be like a play-in game.
Do you think these guys are clinching the playoff spot this week or next week?
I mean, I think it's going to be this week, for sure. I mean, let's be honest here. Like, the Jags are just completely done. They might as well just throw up their fist for the next 2 games and forfeit themselves. Because, New England might score, 70 on them this week. Coming off of last week's game and everything like that. So I think definitely they're going to clinch this week. It's going to be fun to see Mac Jones loses in the playoff, probably in the first round. So I'm looking forward to that. But hey, he can learn some like valuable experience with that one game in the
Bear in
playoffs.
mind, the Titans also have to beat the Dolphins for the Patriots to officially clinch.
Hmm.
That should be easy. Tua can't throw a pass more than 5 yards 20 times in a game, so that's totally doable. I mean, unless unless God forbid that happens, but unless the Titans all entire 53 players gets put on the COVID list, um, that might be their
So you're
shot. But
counting out
at
Miami
that
in this
point, like,
game in particular?
no, I'm counting on Miami losing
Yeah,
actually, which
that's what I mean.
is what I'm gonna disagree with you in our next
Next topic.
team.
I
Yeah,
mean, like I think this is where things get like super interesting, obviously, because there are four teams with an 8-7 record: the Miami Dolphins, the Baltimore Ravens, the Chargers, and the Raiders. Um, as I said, all with an 8-7 record. Miami currently is sitting in that seventh spot, and pretty much need to win their next two games to get into the playoffs. Those two games, as we mentioned, are against the Titans and then the Patriots. Um, Brandon, do you think the Miami Dolphins make the playoffs?
I don't, um, because what I'm basing it on is I don't think they'll beat the Titans, and I don't think they'll beat the Patriots either. So they very well might lose out, which means they'll be stuck with an 8-7 record, which basically means all of these other teams have to lose out in the 8, 9, and 10. So the Ravens, Chargers, and Raiders. Um, and I think the Chargers might be the place for the last playoff spot because the Ravens play the Rams and the Steelers. The Rams are obviously, um, I would say, a better team in that sense, and they're fighting for seeding because they may have clinched, but the division title in the NFC West is still up for grabs. Um, and then the Steelers are also fighting for a playoff spot. So a lot of these teams in the hunt are going to have to like win out and then hope for the best. And so none of them are going to want to lose. They're all going to play basically playoff football at this point. So you're running into the Rams, which are a better team trying to win the division, and you have the Steelers who are also fighting for their lives. So I think they would be lucky to come up with one game, whereas the Chargers play the Broncos and the Raiders. And while they're both technically in the hunt, um, I just don't think they're as good of a quality a team as the other ones have to play. So I think the Chargers have the best chance to take that seventh playoff spot. So I think where I'm sitting is like most of these playoff teams from 2 to 6 are pretty much going to make the playoffs. I don't know what the seeding will be, um, but I don't think the Dolphins will make it in this year.
Jen, you mentioned earlier that you'd be disagreeing with Brandon. Do you think the Dolphins will be making the playoffs this year?
I it seems like Brandon has looked at my notes too because I actually think that the Chargers is gonna replace the Dolphins as well, just solely based off of when it comes to the strength of their schedule and everything like that. Um, and I think that they're definitely going to make it to the playoffs. And just especially after that horrendous loss to the Texans, where they allowed the Texans, to put essentially a 40 burger on them.
I think us spending so much time together talking about the bets, the parlays, the podcast, we've just our brains are starting to work the same because not only was it the same thought, it was the exact same rationale.
Hmm. I think just for shits and giggles, I think it would be amazing if the Raiders somehow made the playoffs. Like like it
I don't
would
think
be
that's gonna happen.
fucking awesome.
Is that because I bet on it and then I reneged myself out of that bet and then I would have to eat my own words plus I already based it on losing a bet? So
Exactly.
it'd just be my worst case scenario would be the Raiders making the playoffs.
Exactly. That's the only reason why.
They'd also be making the playoffs with an interim head coach.
So good for him. So I guess I'm rooting for the Raiders now. I'm watching every Raiders game closely. Unless they lose on Sunday, then it's all over.